G'day, I'm Pete Hughes, and you've clicked on the Reach Australia podcast. This is the third of 4 workshops on the idea of multi-site church. Wade Burnett again takes us through some of the details of how do you go about planting multi-site churches. Really great, important things for us to think through. Hope you enjoy.
All right, great. I'm going to start by saying if we backed up 10 or 15 years into the American church conversation, and Paul had presented all of that, and then I were going to come up and present something different, it kind of would have been pitted as Paul versus Wade. And I would start by saying, let me point out all the challenges of what he just shared, and then I would point out all the strengths of what I'm about to share. The idea back then was that there was one model that would be best, and that you would sort of ferret that out as you work through all the individual options. I think it's now understood, and so I want to remove all of that pressure. There is no longer any sense that there is one best model. What we're after right now is the best fit. Okay, so we have total freedom to look at all the strengths, which many of which you heard from Paul, but there'll be some challenges in that model as well that you need to know. And then the same would be true of the other models too. We're going to dive deep into the weeds on all of these. So Bruce, even to take your question about the culture of American and Australian approaches, I'll just use that as a jumping off point. If we went with those big churches in the middle of the diagram that I put up earlier, and they're reproducing sites, you have some staff roles that I don't see as often here, that have been even just kind of created or shaped over the last 20 or 30 years, like the role of an executive pastor. For the churches that are over here and that are 300, 400, 500 in regular attendance, you have mostly pastors on staff pastoring. When you start to get above that to 1,000 or so, we start to have roles that are very organizational in nature, that do all those kinds of facilities and finance and structure and all of those kind of things. A lot of them come out of the marketplace or from lay leadership into the church. And those things tend to be inherent in the model, and that I don't see as much here. And so that's an example of why some of these larger churches might look the way they do when they reproduce. When I first started coming over here, as I mentioned earlier, the adversarial conversation was around church planting or multi-site. And I want to put up a picture of the 2 guys I met when I first came over, Derek and Scott. This is what they look like when I first came over. So I have a couple of reasons I wanted to put that up, but the first one, and I think the most obvious, is just to point out that church planting is hard. I said we were going to talk strengths and weaknesses. So these are 2 of my favorite people in the world, guys. Thank y'all for letting me have a little bit of fun with you. So I'm going to dive into all that. Strengths, weaknesses. Just moving on. Oh, you're moving on the slide. Okay. Never give Derek the controller when you're going to show him on the screen. You're going to hear differences on what I'm going to put up here to what Paul shared. Quite a big difference in some ways. And again, I'm not about persuasive approaches here. I just want you to have all of it, strengths and weaknesses. So this would have been similar to Paul being in Florida and hearing all of this and learning some of it and then coming back and applying his own unique approach to all of that. And that's what you guys will do too. But this is what we teach. The first step in multi-site has nothing to do with other sites. It's maximizing your current location. So I just was listening to Paul share an approach that they landed on of not reproducing congregations outside of those ideal or optimal times in the morning. I actually agree with that on some levels, but would have a little bit of nuance to suggest there as well. In America, now this is something for you to filter about whether it's true or not, but most most of the different folks in different groups in America would all still agree that Sunday morning is the ideal time for church. And most of those would want to come to church after 9 and leave before noon. That would be their ideal time, culturally for us. It's really, really, really hard to squeeze in 2 services into those windows. You've got 3 hours to do that in, but a lot of people try. So where we've kind of landed on that, for the most part, is a 9 o'clock and an 11 o'clock. And if a church's particular order of worship goes to an hour and a half, then you have a very tight 30-minute window. Certain pastors that I work with are known for going long in their sermons. So that 30-minute window often becomes 20. Or if they're really rolling, 15. I'm just trying to make the point that can be a tight period. So for us, different to what Paul shared, we would often look at maximizing congregations as going from 1, 10 o'clock to 2 at 9 and 11. That would be a nuance that's a little bit different. This approach of twinning services, in other words, having the same service 2 different times, serves a couple of different functions, one of which is it allows volunteers to attend one and serve one, which is a very significant benefit. We actually encourage churches to think about pairing services whenever they might be offered, so that if you have a really strong evening congregation that's overflowing, look at pairing that into 2 evening congregations so that you can have volunteers attend one and serve one. That's known as pairing. That's just a strategy. It's not any kind of prescriptive thing. It's just, again, something for you to consider as you look at your model. When we're evaluating whether a church has maximized their current approach on Sunday mornings, one of the things we do is look at available seating. So who's got just a 10 o'clock service or around there? Anybody in here? Okay, good. How many seats do you have? 390. So we would put up here 390 2 times. But if you're just doing one, what you'd want to see is 80%. These aren't hard and fast rules, they're just guidelines, but just regular attendance in the service. We'd call it adult attendance, even though people bring kids in and they're students and all that stuff, but just in your services, you'd be looking for 80%. When a room in our part of the world is 80% full, it feels full to most people. And so that's when we start looking at other times. This shift from 10 o'clock to 9 or 11 is a pretty easy ask. I'm not saying people won't be disappointed with you or frustrated if you make that move, that they have to start their day an hour earlier or stay at church an hour later. You'll hear that. But it's not overly sacrificial to the point that folks won't do it and folks will settle out in one or the other. But in our experience, if you start pairing congregations and launching these additional ones before you're 80% full, it can be really, really hard on whichever one is lower in attendance. And so you start to get situations where one feels, even if it's not, it feels markedly better than the other, and then that discrepancy grows over time. Y'all with me? So you start to have one that has 300 in attendance and growing, and one that has 105 in attendance and declining, and that's a problem. So that's the reason for that 80% rule. Some churches, now this is, I will say, just from a purely pragmatic evaluation of costs and return. I don't want to ever minimize the importance of what we all do into just that kind of equation, but it is a factor because a lot of these things have costs. This is the lowest cost strategy for reaching more people that I know of. You use what you currently have, you use the people you currently have, you use the strategies you currently have, and you're just reproducing those on site. But it also gets your foot in the water on reproduction, even in the sermon. But there are a lot of other pieces to that too for your staff. Instead of them, say you have 300 in each of these and you're starting to get to that 80%, that's instead of 300 for your staff to care for and mobilize, it's 600. And that's a really stretching experience for your staff team. But it's also a really good training experience for your staff team. So one of the things I look at when church asks me if they're ready for the multi-site conversation is, are you maximizing your current facility? Have you taken this step yet or not? And I would just ask you guys to internally assess that as well. But that's step one. There's other pieces to that too. I won't have time today to go into all of those. We look at children's ministry space, space for gathering, how many people are in groups as a percentage of the church as a whole, how many people are taking next steps in their own discipleship journey, how many are volunteering, what percentage of your church is giving, all those metrics of health. And then we compare those across both congregations and see where you are globally. Y'all with me? Like there's a whole step of assessment there for maximizing what you're currently doing that most people skip when they start having the multi-site conversation. All right, now, moving on from there, let's say you all are maximizing your current facility and you're beginning this conversation about what do we do next. You heard Paul say that Trinity was full at around 800 people for a long, long period of time. That can start to lead to complacency. When you are maximizing your current facility, I would affirm in every way I possibly can, you should do something next. One of the strategies is to build bigger. That's not one that we'll cover here. That's a really, really expensive model. And you are committing a lot of times to debt and construction projects and really significant long-term kinds of changes for your church that better increase these numbers significantly in order to justify the expense of all of those kinds of things you would be investing in. So that's just build bigger. That's all I'm going to say on that one. It's a really significant evaluation on its own. But if you're not going to do that, the two options I know of are multi-site or the picture we put up earlier for Scott and Derek, church planting. And again, when I'm asked which one is better, both are better. They both result in a new congregation that wasn't there before, but they are not always, it's not always clear which one is a better fit. Remember, that's what we're going after today. You're trying to assess for you, out of all of these potential different approaches, which one would be the best fit. Now, if you listen to Dominic and the pastor's heart from when I was here before, however many years ago, it was Regalia and I. It was a really big title for the podcast of Multisite has come to Australia. And I asked Dominic back then, because I hadn't met anybody yet, I literally got off the plane and met him, and we recorded that. I just asked him, can you put maybe in parentheses, because we don't know if anybody's going to do this. But I did cover a little bit of this there. Today we're going to take a much, much deeper dive on all of them. So I use the same letters to help us all remember these things. And today we're going to begin to distinguish what each of these sort of essential areas of assessment for you are and how they look different in multi-site versus in church planting. And some of them are a little more intuitive and make a little bit more sense than others. But the first thing that you have to do either one is a leader. So I'm going to ask either Scott or Derek to come up and give us just a real quick overview of what you would be looking for when you assess a church planter and the potential leadership qualities you'd want to see here as you're thinking about someone who could actually pull that off. So, do you have your mic? Yeah, what do y'all do when someone says, I think I might have a church planter, I'd like for you to assess them?
It depends what model they're using, but
yes.
Do you want to push into that at all? No?
However much you'd like to cover, that's
so
great.
So we're initially when it was just pioneer parachute planting, what are you looking for? My first question to people is, who are you trying to reach? Because I want to see an evangelistic heart that sits at the centre of any of it. Actually, it doesn't matter the model for that one, but initially I want to say who are you trying to reach? I want to hear them articulate that. If they are pioneer parachuting, I want to see them be able to handle ambiguity, be entrepreneurial, be able to cast a vision, be able to build a team. Those are the things, particularly on a pioneer planning track. Yep.
All right, great. I'm going to keep asking Derek to do this, so hang on to your mic. But on the multi-site side, what I'm looking for is, I don't love this word, but the biggest fan ever of your church. That's what I'm looking for. So I want, if I'm at Trinity and Paul's talking about planting another location, I want somebody whose life has been changed through the ministry of Trinity, whose family has been transformed under the teaching of Trinity and the children's ministry approach of Trinity, who wants to see dozens or hundreds of other families get to experience just what they did when they came as a non-believer and came to faith and then were built up in the faith through the approach of this church. Are y'all with me? So I'll give you guys a quick pop quiz then. If I were to say, I want to be a leader, and I were to say to Paul, Paul, I like what you do, but that's all I ever say. Which one do I fall into? Y'all say, I know you're laughing because you know the answer, but which one do I fall into? Church planting. Which word in there was the clue? But now, if I were just to say, Paul, I like what you do, or I love what you do, which one do I fall into? Yeah. Now, there are 10 other layers to all of those. I'm giving you some of the most important ones just so you have a feel of which way you're leaning. But you don't want to be launching out someone who does not fit with the model you're envisioning. What do you think happens if you launch a church planter by nature out in a multi-site model? What do you think happens? Yeah, they're going to spend the whole time trying to change the model. And it's sideways energy when it would have been a much better approach from the very, very beginning to launch them out over here. Good? All right, that's just a little glimpse into the difference in the kind of leader you need on either side. What you're looking for if you're launching a location of your church is the biggest fan ever of your church. Because what you're reproducing when you launch a location is your church. So that's the multi-site approach there.
You also say you're looking for a leader who can build teams.
Oh, 100%. The skill set is not actually all that different.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, number 2 is location. On the multi-site side, I've already said, I'm going to use these just one-word things. You want a fan. Location, you want something 20 minutes away. Let's say you're working within a denomination who has access to buildings and you have maximized your facility and you're out of space and you'd love to launch something and your denominational leader comes to you and says, I have a great building, but it's an hour and a half away and you've never done multi-site before. You go and look at it and it is a wonderful opportunity. But again, now that you've attended this, you know, it should probably be closer to 20 minutes for me to be looking at it as a first location. What should you start suggesting back to that denominational leader for that thing that's an hour and a half away? Church planting. Or another church that's maybe 20 minutes away. And this was Paul's instincts. Let's go in 20 minutes increments all the way out to 2 hours. But if you're talking about it 2 hours first, maybe there's another church there that can start and work into different areas. This is the way the model tends to work best, so that's why I'm sharing these things. We used to share these things as rules, and then we would say, well, now there's exceptions to every rule. Now I don't even share them as rules. They're just principles for you to consider. So any of you guys ever watch diving in the Olympics? Yes? Okay. Here's the clearest illustration I can give you of what you're deciding. How difficult of a dive do you want to do? Y'all with me? A clear fan of your church who wants to launch something at 20 minutes, that's like, I don't know who's not good at diving. I probably should have studied that before I gave that illustration. I'll just say Americans. It's a 7.5. Solid. But then, Scott keeps mentioning this little streak that a lot of you guys have of, I'd like to customize that a little bit, maybe make it a little more bespoke to my unique environment or how I do things. So you ask me, can I do one that has a really independent streak for a church planter and it's 45 minutes away? Can you do that? No, can you do that? Yeah. You just up the difficulty level, though. And that's what I want you guys to see. Of course you can do it. But there's going to be a lot more sideways energy associated with it. And you're going to have to be committed to it a lot more to push it through. So I don't recommend high difficulty dives on your first one. I don't. I've seen a lot of those end up in belly flops in churches that otherwise I think could have pushed through had they been aware of some of the things in the model that are a little easier. I often, and I wouldn't be surprised if this happens today, I often interact with guys who've been really, really, really disillusioned as leaders just because of small little strategic things like this that they weren't aware of. And that created a lot of unnecessary friction as they were trying to reproduce congregations.
Yeah. Sales and anchors. I thought that was a really helpful image.
Yeah.
With, Trinity networks lots of sales anchors.
Yep. So could y'all hear that question? So Scott was asking about sales and anchors. I can touch on this a few times all the way through this. When these go well, and I can't always attribute it to one thing or the other on here. I mean, this is to Paul's point earlier. This is the Lord's church. He will build his church independent of any strategy any of us ever might employ, and beyond any strategy we ever might employ. We all, I hope, would affirm that. But as you use the strategy, what we've seen over the years is done well, it tends to produce things that give you margin to do more. And those would be sales. In other words, they pull you along. So if you launch well with the right leader and there's some margin there to continue moving forward, you'll have a little bit more to do more in the future. When you, for whatever reason, when you tend to see poorer results, they function like anchors. In other words, they pull you backwards. They slow you down. They take a lot of your energy. And rather than being able to go further or forward at all, you end up always looking back to the things that you've already launched. So because of that, I always encourage churches to give a lot of attention to these first ones. And again, we'll talk about that more in a little bit. I was asking Andrew, just to, I'll come to you in just a sec. I was asking Andrew, because I know a lot about their model. And I also know a lot about the outcomes of these different things as you do them. How many of your locations right now are breaking even financially? Because that's an indication of sales or anchors. Like, how far are you going along? Early on, it was all of them. They were all breaking even or more. As you really stretch into new places and really stretch the model, what I find almost every time is that number that are not breaking even starts to go up. And that's a sign that you're really pressing into taking new ground. So Andrew shared, and it was not surprising at all, 5 of the 13 are not breaking even like at the moment. Now that will change, and if I know Paul, they'll launch more because that's what they've done. But he's got a combination of sales and anchors and can tell you very personally what that feels like for each one, to be thinking about the next thing in some places versus always looking at what we need to do to address where we are in the current one. Dominic?
You talked about the 20-minute away church plant rather than the 20-minute away.
Yeah,
Church plant multi-site.
Yes, that's a great question too. Going closer than 20 minutes does add to the difficulty because, again, as I mentioned earlier, people will drive right past you to go to the church that originally launched them out. So imagine somebody who had been with Paul for 20 years, and they hear this appeal to go and launch a new church, and they go out and do that, but it's just 5 minutes away. And all of that history and relationships is just 5 minutes away. And now every time they go on Sunday, it's harder. And getting volunteers is harder. And so you're always struggling with, at some point, a family saying, okay, we just hit a really rough patch as a family, we're going back where we were invested in. And so it can be challenging to get to a place of real momentum when you're closer. It's not as hard as going further away, but it is harder than when you're closer to that sweet spot of around 20 minutes. Great question.
Wait, can you
Yeah.
draw the diagram with the church in the middle, 15, 30-minute radius, and how you're looking for populations of your existing people?
Yeah. Let me draw that one like when we get to the Q&A. Is that good?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I want to make sure we get through this and the differences between the two. All right, this is the biggest one, launch team. The biggest difference between church plants and Multisite. So Paul, what did you say y'all look for on a launch team?
Launch team, 50 to 80, I guess.
All right, 50 to 80. Where's Derek?
Yep.
Derek, what do you look for on a launch team?
About 3 to 4.
All right.
No, me would say even for a pioneer, before you publicly launch, about 30.
Yeah.
Adults.
I'm putting 3 or 4 up there, though, because I love that. I just want you guys to see the difference in... Now, here's a good diagnostic, is does somebody get excited about one or the other as they are thinking about launching something? That's another really good indication of which model might fit them better as you move forward. This is, I believe, now I'm just putting 50 to 80 up here because we're in Australia. If we were in America, I would put 200. So that's why I'm using 50 to 80. You're at 200, you guys feel like you're already launching with a full church. I get it. I've been here before, so I've learned my lessons. But this is, I think, and again, I'm using American data here, but this is the strength of the model, is being able to send out essentially all of the things you need to do church well, to evangelize well, to make disciples well, to hold services well from day one. And you are adding to that number as you go. In America, we see sustainability rates at 3 years of about 90%. On multi-site church launches, which is incredible. There are very, very few that are launched and that are no longer there at 3 years. It's an extremely rare occurrence. And I attribute that to the number of people that are invested in it from day one. I do think this takes longer. I don't think this is as quick a model as finding a leader and 3 or 4 people and turning them loose to go change the world. That's a really exciting thing. And your part in that can go really quickly. But we see in the States, now we don't launch them with 3 to 4 unless they're in the micro church category that you mentioned earlier. But we see sustainability rates as low as 43% at 3 years. So that's actually a recruiting technique for church planters, is no one can do this. And you want the guy that goes, I can, and that's the attraction. That's actually what Geneva Push felt like in its earliest days of church planters, is a bunch of renegades. I call them Navy SEALs. They'll learn it out as they go. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing, but they're very different models and tend to have very different outcomes. So that one can move faster. This one's often slower, but more stable. And on the first one, you should be especially slow and stable. Yes? Yes. What's the space that they're moving into? Great question. 500 that they can fit in, or what are we talking? Yeah, it would be, so most of our locations, if you remember from the big map I put up earlier, around 380 total at that location. So that would be about a 200 or 250 seat location with 2 services in the morning. And then one, maybe 2/3 full and one half full, just on average. Or, yeah, great question. Starting to see the differences between the two? Good. All right, the last one, everybody loves, lots of money. And everybody asks me how much is lots, and I just say, again, a painful amount, more than you have. So I'm assuming, Not much, exactly, that you have. I know. And it takes way more than that. Yes, this is always, I say this one's always a stretch. That's probably an overstatement. There's always one of these that you feel like is totally missing right now. I'll just say that. You may have a location picked out, and again, you've had conversations with another church or denominational leaders, and you got that one checked, but you don't have any money to actually go pursue it. Or you have a leader, and they're ready to go, but you haven't worked out how to develop a launch team, or you haven't maximized in order to be able to send 50 or 60 people. Y'all with me? There's always something missing. I would encourage you guys, especially those of you in the room who are senior ministers, to actually be optimistic about those things that you're missing on this list. Those are the areas where only God can provide. And those are the areas you'll be most encouraged about 3 to 5 years down the road. That we could not find a place We prayed, we fasted, we had all these other things in place, but we just couldn't unlock that last one, and those are the best stories. And so I wouldn't let it stop you that you're missing one of these key things. But I would begin to develop some really specific plans for asking the Lord to provide. Now, Derek has developed another L, which I'd like him to come up and talk through as well. Was that the fifth one?
That's the fifth L.
Yes.
I'm not sure. I bounced this off Wade last night. I'm not sure what he thinks about it, so he can tear it to strips. Actually, how does this work? No, keep going. Sorry for everyone. Hopefully you can see that. Now, I've just stolen shamelessly Wade's stuff, but one of the dynamics that Wade's explained here, we were experiencing talking to churches around multiplication. And so I added this logistics one at you, which, it's really just church planning model. So I'm just using three simplistic ones: Multisite on one end, Pioneer kind of parachute on the other, mother-daughter, which is an interim. Has some Multisite characteristics, but heading towards independence with some Pioneer parachute. And so a lot of our assessment is based on helping leaders think through this. But the logic is, very quickly, the first three, when I'm talking to a senior leader, I'm asking, do you have a leader? If the answer is yes, tell me what, exactly the question Wade asked, tell me what they think of your church. And if it's, yeah, it's good, but, okay, we're not doing Multisite. That's probably not where you're at. But if you're thinking, well, no, we don't have a leader, but we know there's a greenfield suburb over there. It's 45 minutes away. We have to plant a church. Again, what am I thinking? Am I thinking Multisite? Well, probably not. There's a long way to go. But if it's within that 15, 30-minute ring, I think maybe then you've got the other things falling out. If you've got what have I missed there? Some churches are saying we absolutely want to do a multi-site. It then locks you into thinking both the location, you've got a 15, 30-minute ring, and the leader type. This is the kind of person we're looking for. So that's been one of the things. We're, again, always reforming, always fixing, but that's helped us have a conversation with leaders around these really helpful L's that the multi-site has to work out where on the church planning model, depending on what you've already got or what's in your head or what you want to pursue, what's healthy.
That's great. I would strongly recommend when you're evaluating the timing of launches that you are at least aware when you start attempting a high degree of difficulty dive. And I would give you permission to wait, especially on your first one. I think that feels unusual at a conference like this to say it's okay to wait because there's so much need out there. But to the extent you can, view this as a 10-year journey or longer. You're going to have, in my experience, much more significant impact if these are good experiences, even if they're not quick ones. So people ask me, again, for just as practical as we can be, how long should I take to launch one of these? A year or two. That would be my suggestion. Now, can you launch one? If you leave this conference as excited as you've ever been, can you launch one in September? Yes. But what are you attempting? A very high degree of difficulty. And if you're going to do that, you need a lot of attention to practice and discipline and focus and all those things that let you do high difficulty things. Everybody with me? So how difficult is the model I'm launching or the first launch? All right, maximize and then multi-site or church planting. All right, I'm going to leave a couple things up there just so I make sure I come back to them when we do Q&A, including the map that Scott wanted me to draw. But I want to, because of all the different places that you guys shared you were, as we were doing introductions this morning, I want to speak to some things that I think might be helpful to a few of those different places. So I'm going to continue on with the L's. I'm reaching the end of verbs that start with L, so this is not going to last long. But about 90% of the multi-site churches in America are in phase one of this journey, which is the launch phase, and that's one site. And I would say launching is a skill that you can learn. There are some very practical things that go with launching one of these. Paul mentioned one earlier that I loved. Everybody on our launch team has 5 people that they're praying for and that they will be inviting. That's a skill that you're giving to people to strengthen your launch. One of the things we've learned, now our calendars are backwards to yours, so September is fall, but we launch in the fall every time. So I tell everyone the absolute best time to launch a location is in September. And then everyone asks me, well, we can't do September. What's the second best time? And do y'all know what I tell them? September. And it's for the same reasons. It's proven over the years. So in our context, what happens in September is the school year starts. And you get about a 4-month run with no big breaks, and then Christmas. And we get this wonderful gathering experience around Christmas when the whole culture is a little bit more open to things like carols or coming to a Christmas event. And we have the opportunity to invite them. And then the new year starts and there's all the resolutions being made. And you know what? I have thought about going to church before. And it's just a build of momentum all the way up to Easter before things break for our summer holidays and people start scattering. For a lot of years, people would think we should launch on Easter. That's our biggest Sunday. And they would have this great experience on launch day. But then 6 weeks later, it's like, where is everyone? You know, they've all left, school's out, and they've gone other places. And so those are the kind of practical things. There's numerous others that are part of the skill of launching. But the the adjective that I would say describes every one of those is launch when you can. You want to be launching strong. So Paul mentioned this pain too. I have a great volunteer leader who's able to develop other volunteer leaders. I don't want to send them because if I do, I can't do that here anymore. That's exactly who you want to send. You can make it without them at your place, even if it's a little bit more painful, in a way that you might not be able to at the place you're going to. So your best, your brightest, your strongest need to go. Y'all with me? Not so much. That was not a loud amen. Y'all are all feeling the pain of sending your best and brightest out. Good. I want you to feel that pain. This is when your kids leave home, but when they leave home, you want to know they got it. It's not that you don't feel that pain, it's there. And that loss is there. And you'll feel it the next Sunday when you have somebody who's not as good at that job. But where you'll end up 2 to 5 years from there will be very different if you launch strong. So when you're making appeals to the launch team, you're not saying, look, if you've never served before, we need you. They're welcome to go, but that's not who you're talking to. I want you to go have lunch with the best volunteer developer you have. I want you to send, if you're going to send staff, send some of the best staff you have. Because especially on the first one, you want to launch strong. And this is the kind of defining challenge of your first one is, can you launch? If you launch well, you're off and running. If you launch poorly, you've got an anchor, in my experience. So if September or whatever that date is on the calendar for you guys that's most strategic rolls around and you're not ready, I'd really encourage you to pray about whether you wait till the next year and give that some thought. Because again, over a 10-year period, you're way better off launching these strong and slower than launching some anchors out there that are going to take up a lot of your energy and attention and money over that same 10-year period. The next stage of this journey is, can you lead multi-site? And that's where you're at 2 to 3 locations. And this is, I think, the biggest roadblock for leaders in the multi-site journey, because the primary requirements for a leader, a senior minister in a single site church are very different than the kind of what it demands out of you to lead across multiple locations. And not everyone likes it. So this is a lot of what I end up talking to pastors about is they're frustrated here because what they're doing all day is not what they got into ministry to do all day. They're dealing with challenges from other locations and staff and some strategies that aren't being reproduced. And this site has some issues with the building that we can't afford to fix, so we have to pull some money. Y'all with me? That's what it starts to feel like to lead a lot of those I'll just ask Paul, when you got into this space with 2 or 3 locations and you start dealing with all those practical challenges and you're no longer functioning as a pastor at one site, but you're sort of overseeing all these other things, did you look at other roles beyond just at the locations or your lead pastor role in there to help you?
Sorry, what's the question?
Yeah, did you pull anybody to help you with all those other things?
Absolutely. So I pulled 2 or 3 people. Like,
Can we get you a mic here?
Thanks, Matt. So what I've kept doing is thinking about the executive team we need to run a network so that I could keep leading the network. So people like Andrew that I've already introduced, his skill set is in business and management and really a multi-site franchising sort of business. So that's what he did before he came on board. Another guy I recruited was doing really well in BHP, pulled him out of that to do something with me, and trying to build those skill sets around me to run the organisational side so that I could actually still keep doing what I thought I needed to do.
Perfect. That's every one of the churches that I've ever seen that gets through this stage well, and the pastor enjoys it. There's an executive team or an executive pastor or an executive committee who says, Paul, you don't need to be spending your time deciding whether we need a new driveway at the other 3 locations. Let us do that. Let us figure out the budget we'll give them to run staff there. Y'all with me? We could come up with 100 examples, but this new role is essential in the leadership stage. And so a lot of what, even this week, as I've met with senior pastors and I've shared, if you go down this path, your role changes. Do you want it to? When I meet with a pastor who says, what I did when I was back in Louisiana, I love being with people. I've done the membership interview for everybody in this church. I've hired every staff person. I beat people to the hospital. That was me. And then what this does is it puts space in between you and all those pastoral experiences, and not everybody is going to be okay with that. And so part of what I want to do is say right on the front end, you might want to consider just launching one. And that might be better. Because what I'd like to see happen is I'd like these to actually be positive experiences that don't drive pastors out of ministry. And that 5 years in or 10 years in, they're still thankful that this was something they tackled. But not to feel this external pressure that you did one well, so you need to launch 2 or 3. Y'all with me? And if you want to keep launching things, but this is not something that you feel particularly called to or gifted to work with an executive or an executive team, then it might be to launch one and then to launch church plants from that point forward, because we're always going to be pursuing something. And those are a lot easier. Y'all with me? So when I work with churches who are in this stage, I almost always zero in here on the pastor, the relationship to the executives or the executive team, and how is that working. I can also tell you that when someone gets here, I always find really strong gifting here as well. That might be a very unique pastor that has both pastoral and executive ability. That's rare. I think we all think we're like that. I always jokingly say, because one of my titles has been executive pastor, and people ask me, what does that mean? And I say, it's 2 words that they can do one of well. So you tend to get people who are on the executive side of that or the pastoral side of that. It's really rare to get both. So what I want to see here is a really strong pastor, like you all saw in that presentation, supported by a really strong executive team and or executive role, and a really strong relationship between the two that does not feel like friction. It feels like you get the best of both. And that's what we're looking for in this lead stage of development across churches. I think I can say this somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but also with a little truth behind it. Almost no one gets past that stage, past 2 or 3. Almost no one gets past that stage. The stage that's past there is what you heard from Paul, which is leverage. And that's 4+ sites. And if you read that Substack that I mentioned from Michael Bird, this is where it almost starts to function like a little mini diocese, where, as you heard from Paul, he's appointing the leaders. They are accountable to the church, sure, but to him for specific things in leading and reproducing. This starts to feel much more central than this, which is something we'll get into very briefly here in just a second. I think this is so rare that I rarely teach on it. It is very unlikely that many of you are going to hear, and it's even more unlikely that I'm going to give you answers from up front that will answer the questions you need answered for here, because this is so unique. This is no longer me looking at patterns and things we know from the 5,000 launches. This is me developing relationships across the 50 churches in the world that would fall within your specific theological convictions and your kinds of polity that you could learn from as you tackle the unique challenges of leveraging. Y'all with me? So the future Pauls that are in the room, and I know you all are, you're all going to have 14 of these 20 years from now. Your answers are unlikely to come from this stage. That's what I want you to hear. You need to go talk to Paul. And everybody will ask him, can you come visit us? And he can't. Go to Adelaide and buy him lunch or sit down with him for as much time as he will give you and learn everything you can. If you're doing 2 or 3 well and you still feel called to pursue this model of reproducing congregations across multiple locations in ways that can lead to more and more and more of these. Y'all with me? This is very unusual. And then when you get to the end of that, write a book and give it away. Like, give the book away and let the others that are out there know that too. Now, since most of us are in this stage here, and I am going to try to end on time so we can have our break and then have tons of time for Q&A. Can we put the slide up from Brad House, the multi-church slide? Yeah, that was it. Everybody always asks me, how do these locations relate to one another up here? And my answer is, how do you want them to relate to one another? You're the one launching it. So what should it look like? This is a book that was written a number of years ago by Brad House, and I'll just give some very, very high-level thoughts on it. So you're moving from more centralized, where all of the decision-making authority is at the sending church, to more contextualized, over on the right, where all of the decision-making authority is in the church that was launched, the congregation that was launched. And then in the middle are shades of that transition moving across the board. So you have one church with a single service, and then as I recommended earlier, that moves to one church with multiple services, or maybe venues who start to use the gym or a family center. Those are easy. But then franchise there, the third one from the left, one church, and then I love this loaded term, cloned. So you know right off the bat where Brad is as he approaches all of this. Cloned to multiple sites, that's a franchise. Okay, so that is what most people would think of as multi-site in that big church model that I had up this morning. Y'all remember that one? Those would be franchises. Federation would be one church contextualized in multiple locations. All that means is the decision-making authority is still in the sending church, but you're giving freedom in specific areas to locations to do it differently in some ways. They don't have autonomy to decide to do everything differently, but if they were to say, we don't have 8 children's ministry rooms, we have 1, so we can't do what that sending church does. We have to do it differently here. That starts to get into that federation model, where some aspects of the church look differently, and they're given permission to do that. So that starts to be a federation. Now, I'm going to make one last joke as we wrap up, but as y'all know, there's truth under every one of these that I do actually believe in. Everything to the right of federation starts to not work more and more and more, okay? And everybody thinks they can solve it. So when you do, I would love for you to call me, because I'll use you in the next time I present this. But again, you're starting to get down here into a very unique approach when you get further and further over onto the right side. Now, at one church in the launch stage, you can pretty much do this however you want to. Because what do you do when you launch John out and there's a problem? What do? You call John. Y'all know each other? You're the one that launched him out, right? You work it out. The challenges start to come in when you get here. And that's where the sustainability of those models on the right side get really, really hard. Because then you're no longer dealing with just one personality or one philosophical difference or one challenge, but you're starting to deal with multiple. And that's where I start to say you're starting to function more like a bishop. I'm just using contextual language here. You're trying to serve local church problems from a centralized area. And I met with the Sydney bishops on Thursday. One of their biggest structural challenges is if they have someone that they can't change in any way, and they also can't move them on in any way, this is a technical word, stuck. And that's what it starts to feel like over on the right. And so what you heard Paul saying is, these are some things we pulled to the center to make sure that when there are issues, we can address them. And that moves you more back further over on the left side of this. It's not wrong to be more centralized. So folks that are on the right side, and they really want that ideal world where they get all the support of the sending church, but a lot of autonomy over on the right-hand side as well to contextualize ministry for the way that they want to lead. Y'all with me? The dream scenario. I just recommend that you think about Multisite as a launch model to a church plant. Release them. Once they're strong enough and up and running, and you don't want to pull back all that centralized authority, then you've got a wonderful solution there where those can begin to function as autonomous churches. And you can be creative about how you support that when it comes to things like the website or HR or finances or any of the others. There are very kind of creative solutions to all of those things to help churches ease into independence rather than just feeling like they were let go. So again, that starts to speak to all of the different unique ways that have been developed over the years. Those 6 things, and we'll cover them, or at least cover questions around them in our last session when we come back. But those 6 approaches that are unique and in development stages, a lot of those relate to unique approaches for how you tackle this question of who actually has authority and who actually makes decisions. We'll come back to those after the break.
Well, that was Wade Burnett, and I hope that's got you thinking of the possibilities of multiplication in your particular scenario. If you would like to know more, make sure you jump onto our website, look for the church planting tab, and take advantage of everything that's there. But be in contact. We would love to help you. I'm Pete Hughes. Chat soon.